It's the economic side that is pushing Europe towards needing war. And if they don't do that, then the problem they see is that when the pensions fail, the euro is failing, then people are going to pick up their pitchforks and storm the parliaments. The whole COVID scam, stuff like that, was for climate change. I had inside information that coming from the WEF 3 months before anybody even heard of the word COVID. Phone calls were being made, get out of the markets, a virus is coming. The whole reason for the migrant crisis initially began under this theory that the birth rate is falling. So therefore, they need more people to come in because all these pension funds are on Ponzi schemes. And then it has migrated to itself to using these people. They think they can draft them into war against Russia. I can tell you, I was on the phone with people from Romania, and they were instructed. I'm not sure what's in the news, the press yet, but I was told directly that they were instructed to take 100,000 migrants in from Middle East and Africa. And so why? What are these people? No skills, nothing, don't even speak the language, basically just for soldiers.
Welcome to Discourse with Christian. I'm your host, Christian White, and today is, of course, a returning guest, Martin Armstrong, the founder, of course, of Armstrong Economics. Martin, how you been? Thanks for carving out the time today.
Oh, not too bad. Hanging in there. Just watching the world go crazy all the time.
Well, obviously there's a lot going on with, I figured we'd start off with your latest thoughts going on around the world.
Well, you had news finally coming out that France and Britain, may have to apply for an IMF loan. This is what I've been talking about, that the economic conditions of Europe are just pathetic. You can look on, on the Federal Reserve database and just compare the quarterly economic growth of the EU to the United States. It's a tiny fraction. They're falling apart. It's crumbling. And this has been the incentive for war. And it's a classic psychological phenomenon that Freud even understood. And it's called projection. And you project onto others what you would do yourself. And when you look at the actions of all these world leaders in Europe and these neocons, and it's stark raving madness. They are fulfilling exactly what Freud said. And when Khrushchev was there and said, "We will bury you," he was a real believer in communism. And he actually believed that stuff, that communism is going to defeat capitalism. So it was more dogma. And when Yeltsin was getting attacked by the neocons over here, and then the communists on the other side had filed a motion for impeachment, and they turned to Putin. And Putin wasn't a communist, and he wasn't an oligarch. And the people cheered. His popularity was over 70%, more than any American president ever had, mainly because they did not want to go back to communism, and they were sick and tired of their oligarchs who were basically trying to sell Russia to line their own pockets. Really, that's really what was going on. So they're not interested in returning to that sort of a lifestyle any more than the people in Eastern Europe are, or even China for that matter. So I think that, what they constantly do. I mean, when you have that video of Lindsey Graham with Zelensky saying, "Oh, this is the best money we ever spent to kill Russians." They're still living in the 50s. Oh, they want to spread communism to the whole world, so we're going to spread democracy to the whole world. Well, that stopped, but you didn't. I had arguments with Bill Kristol back in the 90s. We removed Saddam Hussein out of Iraq, Assad out of Syria, and Gaddafi out of Libya. We'll bring peace to the Middle East. I said, you're out of your mind. They judge others like they're a country, but we drew these borders. We carved up the Ottoman Empire, and there are ethnic differences, the same as you saw in the Balkans when Czechoslovakia split. It was Czech Republic versus Slovakia. Yugoslavia broke up, all along ethnic lines. That's what's going on in Ukraine. The Donbass are Russians, and the rest aren't. I mean, these differences are there for centuries. In the Middle East, they see themselves as Sunni, Shiite, Kurd. That comes first. They never saw themselves as a nation. So, I mean, these are delusional things, and they project, exactly as Freud said, whatever they think upon somebody else. And it's just not the same. You can't do that. So this is all you see in it. My opinion is that they have usurped American foreign policy. That was why they pushed Biden in, and they wanted him to run again, because he's just one of those dolls on the back of a car with the head keeps bopping. They got to do whatever they wanted. You take Blinken. These people only look at what they want to achieve. He removed Russia from the SWIFT system. Oh, I'll punish you. All right. Then he actually threatened China. You help Russia, we'll do the same to you. As if the United States can rule the world. What happened? Okay. So they all started leaving. They created BRICS, their own clearing systems. I can't blame them. And even India, we're not going to be dictated to. We're not a plebe in the Roman Republic. But this is their attitude. They usurped American foreign policy and put in their own agenda that has nothing to do with the American people or our country. You can look on YouTube, and I suggest looking at Robert McNamara's apology for taking us into Vietnam. And I guess he wanted to clear his conscience before he died, because 58,000 Americans died in that fiasco. And he said, we thought Russia was involved. So we were defending our democracy and all this other kind of stuff. And then he admits we were wrong. Russia wasn't involved. It was just a civil war. Fine. 58,000 Americans died because you were wrong. All right. And how many millions of other people died? That's what I mean. They project on other people what they think. And they don't listen, or they only hear what they want to hear. They say, oh, well, Putin wanted to resurrect the USSR. No, he didn't. They took a comment that he said at the fall of the Roman Empire, of the czars. okay, was a great tragedy. He also criticized Lenin. And there were even, you can Google it up, they were questioning if he said he wasn't a statesman, he was just a Bolshevik. And so he wasn't praising the USSR. He was praising the old Roman, the old Russian Empire of the Tsars. And there were even speculation that he was going to remove Lenin's tomb from Moscow. And he said, "No, I'm not going to do that. It would cause too much civil unrest and a problem." Um, but they go, "Oh, see, he wanted to resurrect communism in the USSR." He didn't want to do that. They don't look at the second half where he's criticizing the Bolsheviks. So, I mean, you have to listen to, everything and stop judging everybody by what you think, what you would do. I saw it in Australia. They felt sorry for these Aborigines. Oh, they're sleeping in riverbeds. So they built them housing, some apartments, and furnished them. And went in, took the furniture, took it out, and used it as firewood. So, I sleep under the stars. To them, that's like sleeping in a prison cell. You can't judge everybody by what you think is norm. And I don't know. Until we just need a new crop of leaders in Europe, and we got to get rid of these neocons. I mean, they're the ones taking us into war, and it's just, it's like, me walking into a bar and I punch you in the mouth. Why'd you do that? Because, well, I knew you really wanted to hit me, so it's self-defense. It's a nice theory, but it does, it's not practical. But this is the way they are. They everything is. They're still fighting communism like McCarthy from the 50s. And you just had Ursula coming out and saying they're drawing up definitive plans to send troops into Ukraine. And then what will happen? Europe needs war. This is an old strategy, goes back into ancient times. All right. When you're failing, you need an external enemy. Otherwise, they're going to come get you. And you've got France and Britain on the verge of people even discussing IMF loans. And France is one of the largest economies in the EU. I mean, the whole thing is just screwed. I mean, I've spoken to people in France. They call Macron the Petit Napoleon. He wants to conquer. They delusional. They even have proposed that if they conquered Russia and they listened to the neocons, oh, they're weak, they could be taken. You had Kinzinger, who was on the January 6th thing, said we could defeat Russia in 3 days. 3 days. So I guess 5 days for China, and then we rule the world. What? And who's going to save us from them? But it's just getting to be completely nuts. They think that they can conquer Russia. They have 75 trillion in assets, and what I have heard is that they think if they get their hands on that, then that's twice the size of the U.S. national debt, and Europe will rise again like the Roman Empire. They're just nuts. They always want past glories. I've been up to lunch in London, and you get a few drinks in them, and then they go, the sun still doesn't set on the British Empire. Yeah, okay. And Tokyo, the same thing. I've been to dinners. You get a few drinks in the old guys, and they go, the Emperor's still God. Yeah, okay. Turkey, you got Erdogan, drooling over the prospect of resurrecting the Ottoman Empire. Um, we handed a handful of jets to Greece and made the front pages. They said, now we can do a sneak attack on Turkey. you know, I mean, they're two NATO countries, but that hatred goes back to the days of Alexander the Great. I think that's why a lot of people fled Europe, came to America. They wanted to get away from all that shit. And that's why Americans were always isolationists. I was watching a documentary on FDR, and he went to Boston to try and justify sending troops to get into World War II because Congress would always say no until Pearl Harbor. And the Irish said, you really expected us to send our boys to go defend the Brits after what they did to us in Ireland? I mean, this was what you saw. It was like, they basically came here to get away from all that stuff. And that's why Americans were always isolationists. They didn't want to get involved. And thanks to our neocons, they keep trying to get us involved in everything. But this is what you're really looking at. It's I warned Europe. They came to me when we were forming the euro. I told them how to do it. I told them it was going to fail, and this is the risk. We saw that with Greece in 2010 when they needed an IMF loan. What happened? All the traders shortened Greece, made a fortune. Who's next? Oh, Spain. Yeah. This is the way capital functions. Okay. You're in a trading room and everybody's like, okay, what's next? Everybody was in Tokyo for 89. Then what happened? Oh, okay, what's next? Oh, Southeast Asia. Then that peaks in 94. All right. Then, what's next? Oh, the euro. They're coming for the euro. It runs back the other way. This is capital acts like a herd of wild animals. I've been doing this for more than, close to 50 years. And I've seen it all the time. This is how it works. And I warned Europe that if they did not consolidate the debt, this is going to be the problem. Just look at all the peripheral interest rates. You have a single currency, that's fine, but every country pays a different interest rate according to the credit rating. I said, look, we have a single currency in the United States. Single rate only applies to the federal government. You have 50 states, and they pay different rates according to their credit rating. All right, that's what will happen in Europe. Now, the problem here, California could go bust. And the traders are going, oh, okay, who's next? Oh, maybe Illinois. All right. They're not going to go to the feds. It's a different system. In Europe, when you don't have that federal debt, France goes down. Oh, who is next? Oh, look at Germany. They're maybe ready to pull off, go off the edge as well. And you'll get the same kind of contagion. It will run and attack one currency to another. You can read, it's free online, Herbert Hoover's memoirs. Go to 1931. Same thing happened. French started attacking the Austrian bonds. Germany tried to support Austria. The French then turned on Germany. Brits tried to help Germany, and they all ended up defaulting. And Hoover, in his memoirs, said capital acted like a loose cannon on the deck of a ship in the middle of a torrid hurricane light. It was shooting off in every which direction so fast. He said we couldn't form a committee quick enough to figure out where it was going next. That's how capital moves. So understand, a debt crisis in Europe can send the dollar up dramatically, mainly because you got to park your money someplace. All right. So World War I, World War II, the capital came here. Even the Suez Canal crisis, capital came to the dollar. Cuban Missile Crisis, no, because the risk of conflict was here. So capital moves away from wherever the risk of conflict is. If China went into Taiwan, Japanese capital is coming to America. It's just simply the way it works. You always move your money away from wherever the geopolitical event is. You're not going to leave your money in a bank with tanks driving down the street, blowing up every building. I mean, come on. So this is the risk that we see going forward. And so it's the economic side that is pushing Europe towards needing war. And if they don't do that, then the problem they see is that when the pensions fail, the euro is failing, then people are going to pick up their pitchforks and storm the parliaments. Every revolution, look at them, they basically start over taxation and debt. French Revolution, American Revolution, no taxation without representation. Taxes and debt have caused more revolutions than any other issue throughout history. Even you go back to the plebes, they were in 494, BC. They walked out, refused to work. They forced political change in the Roman Republic. Debt was even worse then. That if you couldn't pay, then to satisfy the debt, you became a slave. They'd take your kids and sell them into slavery. So it was a little bit, much more serious back then. But just look at most of them. It's always these issues. Yet, for some reason, I don't know why, but the vast majority never pays attention to it.
You mentioned about debt. You had me, over in the during the Roman period. You just mentioned about it was more egregious if you were indebted and such. With the children and such. You're reminding me of debtor's prison and such. Going back a couple hundred years ago, and a lot of prominent people throughout the ages have had to do that and such. As it relates to Europe and in particular the European leaders and such, I just saw today that apparently, and I'm looking at my notes here real quick, that I guess 6 AFD candidates have died under questionable, more or less circumstances. Do you care to share any commentary on that?
Look, they've used assassinations, pretty prominent, I would say. It became a real theory um, during the 19th century. Lincoln, etc. McKinley, Garfield. I mean, these were, it was the anarchic theory that you remove a head and then you get the political change. Justified in that it's you're only killing one person instead of war. But look, this is why they tried to assassinate Trump. They took out Kennedy. Similar reasons. He didn't want to go into Vietnam, the Bay of Pigs. Neocons took him out. I mean, there was a letter I posted on my site that came out of the papers that were finally declassified. A CIA agent told his family in New Jersey that the CIA had killed JFK, and he was concerned about his life. And he was found shot to death, I think, within a few weeks. I mean, this is, look, they tried outlawing AFD. This represents a tremendous risk of power loss to them. And it even is less than, I would say, not. It's not even over philosophy. It's, I have to retain this power. We can't let them in. And they tried outlawing it. They called them Nazis, everything. And AfD became the number one party in Germany. Too much of a threat. You see this pretty consistently throughout history. They, what I ended up involved, they were trying to take over Russia. And they were, blackmailing Yeltsin, and then that was to be putting in their puppet, Boris Berezovsky, and his bodyguard said that MI6 took him out. They couldn't say Putin did because he wrote letters to Putin, which became public, and they were called his begging letters. So why would, if Putin wanted to kill him, fine, yeah, come on back, kill him and over there. And so they said, he committed suicide. Epstein, suicide. And, there was another suicide. I spoke to people on investigating the Vince Foster supposed suicide. There are videos of them. He he was shot in an office someplace. Part of his skull was gone. They took the body to a park. Never found the missing part of the skull, but he killed himself there. And then there's a video of them. How did he get there? And then they forgot. And somebody picked his car and drove it there to pretend he drove himself there. I mean, look, this stuff this is what they do. They routinely resort to assassinations. They call it, suicide. As soon as you hear that word, what was behind it? You have Maxwell, her father, Robert Maxwell, was under subpoena, lost 200 million pounds, illegal trading with the club. But it was money that was taken from the pension funds. And he suddenly fell off his yacht and drowned. A week before he's subpoenaed and supposed to show up to testify. How about that? Very interesting. I won't say who, but when somebody was asking me to join the club, I just said, I do know how to swim. And remark was, well, things happen. I said, yes, I know things happen. Okay. But look, this is standard. They will take out anybody that is a threat to their power. I was asked to go meet with Ross Perot. I was in Tokyo, so I changed my flight to Texas. That was the weekend he withdrew. And he came out, they're threatening my daughter's wedding or some nonsense. That wasn't it. He had an airport, like a cargo type private airport. and they accused him of, oh, that's where drugs are coming in. Step out, or all this is going to come up in your face. Oh, my daughter's wedding, they threatened to disrupt it, so he's not going to run for president. Yeah, right. Look, I've just seen more than I wanted to ever see in my life. I don't trust a damn thing that they say on anything. As soon as you hear somebody, oh, suicide, question it. And take Epstein. Look, there's no way they could possibly have a trial. He could start calling in all the people that were there. All right, call in Bill Clinton. Call in, did you really have sex with her? Yes or no? Can you imagine a trial like that? I mean, there's no way. Oh, he committed suicide. Very convenient. This is what they do. It's standard operating procedure. There was one, I don't remember the guy's name, but there was somebody connected to the Clintons. Shot himself with a shotgun in the chest and hung himself. So the question always was, well, did he hang himself first or did he shoot himself first? I forget which one that is. You could probably Google it and find out. I forget his name. But I mean, this is the nonsense. And it was a suicide. Yeah, okay, suicide. Somebody shoots me in the head from 1,500 feet away. It's a suicide. It was a remote gun, who the heck knows? I mean, it's just, but, they know that the press will not tell the truth. So why bother?
Yes, and I also want to add the prosecutor, I guess, who was going after the Biden administration. I think she was maybe about 40, give or take. She had an apparent suicide. It's just crazy how many people, whistleblowers, things of that nature. Well, let's see here. Gosh, I can go off in a million different directions. Well, look, I'll just ask you this, and I know sometimes it gets, I guess, controversial, especially people in the conservative area and such. What's your take on the state of Israel? Because you hear about the Epstein stuff, you hear about Mossad, you hear about the things over in Gaza. I don't know if you care to share your personal commentary on that. I'm just curious to hear your take on that and things going on over in the Middle East.
I think it's been a PR disaster for Israel, what they've done in Gaza, really. And there is a problem with any of these types of terrorists or whatever. Even Zelensky, Saddam Hussein, they all use it. What do? They put military production or targets or whatever deliberately in residential areas. They use the people as a cover. And see, they killed all these civilians. Why? What was there? Zelensky has just done that. And if you look closely, you'll see what Russia actually, when they hit Kiev. Why? All right. Look at what they did. The same thing with Israel taking out embassies, stuff like this. It's pretty standard. Saddam Hussein, they, put military assets in civilian areas. It's to protect them. And then if they take them out, see, they killed all these civilians, women and children. It's pretty standard in military. So I think, the Hamas has done a good job as far as PR against Israel. Israel's taken the bait on too many things, but also Bibi is a neocon. He went to school in Philadelphia. I grew up in that area. He was friends with Bill Kristol. Bill Kristol's father started the neocon movement. Bibi was at the Kristol's family affairs. He is dyed-in-the-wool neocon. They used him to get to Trump. I think Trump thought, okay, fine, he's a head of state, but he's no different than John Bolton or the rest of them. And look, my sources said, look, what Israel does, they try to eliminate the leadership. And Trump, they took out a lot of the top people in Iran, and Trump stepped in and said, no, do not assassinate the Ayatollah. I passed on information. Maybe they acted on it or they didn't. I'm not sure. The problem with taking him out, it would be like a Protestant assassinating the Pope. About, on average, 25 to 30% of the people in of these other countries, Egypt, etc., are Shiite. So he's the leader of the Shiites. Yes, also Iran, true, but he's perceived to be kind of like the head of that religion. The same thing you see with Zelensky in Ukraine. He's outlawed the religion because they were, Eastern Orthodox is, reports basically to the Patriarch of Moscow. So he outlawed the religion, and he sets up a patriarch in Kiev. You have to worship him, not Moscow. You can't do this kind of stuff. But so with Israel, look, they did a good PR job against it. I do think that taking the bait and going after the terrorists who plant themselves in residential areas for PR purposes. Shouldn't have done that. So it creates more of a problem. And then you have like Erdogan saying that supporting Hamas, etc., because he wants to be the next caliph. And the Ottoman Empire, Israel was part of the Ottoman Empire. So he wants to resurrect that. As he's said many, many times in speeches. So it's just a real mess. And I don't see it as something that's solvable. Because then you have a bunch of Kabbalists in the Jewish faith, and then you have evangelical Christians, and they all want to deliberately bring on Armageddon because they think that Christ will return. To the Jews, will be the Messiah. And They rebuilding the temple, all this stuff. I mean, it's you actually have people deliberately trying to do that there. I mean, they're keeping a pretty tight protection around the Dome of the Rock. Um, that's where the Jewish temple was. I don't know if anybody's ever been there, but I mean, I've been there. There is this huge rock in there, and to the Jews, this is the rock that Abraham brought his son to sacrifice. And to the Muslims, this is the rock that Muhammad ascended to heaven from. The same rock. And anybody's been to the Middle East, I've toured the whole area. It's like, I don't know. I mean, it's like, no, whatever somebody said something happened here, no. Somebody else did this. The exact same spot. I've been to the church of the crucifixion there. It was built by, I think it was, may have been initially constructed after Constantine's mother. It's very old, and it has the mound where the three crosses were, and on the other side of the church is Christ's tomb. Well, every Christian sect has is there. So you have Eastern Orthodox, you have Catholicism. They have not been able to agree on how to finish the church. You go there, it's still like it was probably more than 1,000 years ago. So if they can never agree on how to finish it, what hope do you have in the Middle East? Where religion gets in there, there's no negotiation.
Crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. Wanted to real quick revisit Europe real quick. I have down on my notes, and I'm borrowing this from. I was listening to Alex Craner on another show. He mentioned about, and I'd love to hear your take on this. I have down. He mentions about money lending oligarchies, sacrifice nations and populations to weaken Russia. He mentions about cut welfare, pensions, health, education to fund wars, use propaganda, plus youth unemployment to manufacture soldiers and things of that nature. I don't know if you care to share your thoughts or unpack that. If you have any commentary.
I don't know about all of that, but what I do know is that what has happened is that the whole reason for the migrant crisis initially began under this theory that the birth rate is falling. So therefore, they need more people to come in because all these pension funds are on Ponzi schemes. And they only survive provided you're increasing generation by generation. When you start getting in one generation declining versus the previous, then there aren't enough taxpayers to pay off the previous one. So that was the initial idea. And then it has migrated to itself to using these people. They think they can draft them into war against Russia. I can tell you, I was on the phone with people from Romania, and they were instructed. I'm not sure what's in the news, the press yet, but I was told directly that they were instructed to take 100,000 migrants in from Middle East and Africa. And so, why? What are these people? No skills, nothing. Don't even speak the language. Basically, just for soldiers. And I think it's a huge mistake. An example from history is the Emperor Valens. Around 360 AD, what happened was um, you had the Goths petitioning to come in because Attila the Hun was moving from Asia to Europe. So they came in. The emperor thought, okay, fine, I'll train them to be soldiers, build up my army to go against Attila. Train them, everything else. They said, oh, thank you. What did they do? They turned on the emperor, killed him in battle, uh, and conquered it themselves. Um, I don't see these migrants actually willing to go die to defend Europe from Russia. I just don't see it. Um, and but look, they as you know, as I said, these people just project onto others, and they think that okay, fine, I write a law, and you're going to have to obey it, or else what? All right. And you're not talking about an individual. You're talking about they want in Romania. They want them taking 100,000. That's a pretty good sized army. Um, so I don't know. I mean, look, economically, Europe is a basket case. The pensions are going to start um, with serious problems there. I warned them that they went to negative interest rates. You're strip mining the pensions and the banks, who's by law on average they have to have 70% government debt. So when you went negative, so you're now extracting money out of the pension funds, and and you say this to these people, and it's like, oh yeah, I see what you're talking about. Yeah, that's interesting. That's it. Um, and they kept it up for what, almost 10 years. Didn't stimulate the economy at all. Just allowed government to grow higher and bigger and stronger. That's it.
Crazy, crazy. Um, as it relates to, I wanted to one of the things I've been bringing up for those who watch the show consistently. I'm very fascinated by power structures and things of that nature. And I know offline you mentioned about how, or I should say in the past, that a lot of these politicians and such are not as smart as is portrayed and such. But people kind of behind them. I mentioned about how I was watching a video on X. Some people have already heard of him, but Archbishop Vigano, who was excommunicated by then Pope Francis, I believe, he mentioned about the Clintons, John Podesta, things of that nature. And I'm bringing this up because as I try and go down the rabbit hole, given the time that I have, I mean, not everyone has time like you and I to like kind of go down rabbit holes and such, but I keep seeing the same consistent themes, and it's just very striking to me, and how little attention it receives. And I can't believe that you had an Italian archbishop who was how as high ranking as he was mention about political figures, especially over in the states, being involved in trafficking and other nefarious activities. I don't know if you care to go down that rabbit hole a little bit with me, or share your thoughts and things of that nature.
I don't really know because I haven't really looked at that whole Pizzagate type thing. All I can say is I know that there has been this theory around for centuries that if you drink the blood or something of someone younger, that makes you younger or something like that, or transfuse the blood or whatever. Um, so I do know that that has existed uh, outside of this Pizzagate thing. Um, are they um, deranged enough to follow that, to think that will prolong their life? Who knows? I mean, it's I think that you take Klaus Schwab and this idea of growing hearts and stuff like that. okay, mine's going to kick out, so clone mine and give me a new one so I can live another 50 years or something. Uh, I mean, there are definitely people that are afraid to die. Um, and seem to go to whatever lengths they possibly can to do so, um, to avoid it. But as they say, that's life. If you're drinking the blood of goats or young kids or whatever, I don't think that's really going to change things. I don't particularly believe in that. I'm not sure I'd want to prolong being here anyhow. It's if Scotty wants to beam me up, I'm ready. I think humanity is just what I see. It's just we got the worst crop of world leaders ever in my entire life that I've ever witnessed. I mean, he used to be thoughtful but like I've said before, I was part of the vetting process for people that wanted to be president. They would send me in to explain how the world economy, how we're all connected, really worked. And then in 1999, I was asked to go. They said they wanted me to go meet with Bush Jr. I said, fine. They said, I don't know, but this one's different. I said, what's different? I said, no, he's really stupid. And they used those words. And I said, excuse me? I said, why would you make somebody stupid president? Whereas before, it was always, do you think he's smart enough? And they said, well, he's got the name so we can win. That was 99. They picked the cabinet. I was even asked to take chief economic advisor. I said, no, thanks. I'm not interested. And so when Trump first came in, they did the same. Oh, you're not a politician. We have to give confidence to the world that the government's going to be run properly. And he listened. And they stuffed his cabinet with everybody that stabbed him in the back. All right, this time, this is why he picked his cabinet before he even got there. You're not going to do this to me again. This is the way the deep state controls things. Yeah, I've witnessed it myself. It's they picked Dick Cheney. He was really president. He decided to take us into Iraq. It wasn't Bush. I mean, this is what it is. That's the power. It's the deep state. I think people are beginning to realize that more. But it's the same thing taking out AFD people. It's the deep state everywhere you go. The unelected bureaucrats. When they created the Eurozone, the EU, look at it. Ursula, the president, never stands for election. Google her. She's never even stood for election for a dog catcher. Never. She's appointed. Okay? But they call this democracy. You have no right to vote. You didn't put her in, and you can't get rid of her. The people that make up the laws, the commission, unelected. You elect a parliament for a dog and pony show. They have no power to create any legislation. Look a little bit closer. They deliberately eliminated the ability of the people to change government. That's what's so wrong about Europe. When I do, podcasts from Sweden, Netherlands, all the way down to Palermo. 3 years ago, they would say, "You really think the EU is going to fall apart?" I go, "Absolutely." And now I get, when? We've had enough. And you can see it. It's all coming to a head. I don't think the EU will last beyond 2029. Honestly, it's a real problem, and they deliberately set it up so that the people have no right to vote. Canadians are starting to get upset. Carney didn't stand for who made Carney the head. He didn't run for that. The party appoints him. People have had enough of this parliamentary nonsense. Look at our election. All right. I warned RFK's people. I said, look, my sources say they're not going to allow him on the ticket. Oh, come on. They didn't allow him on the ticket. Then he had some sort of deep state person on his staff giving him the bullshit that he could win independently. I warned them. I said, my computer says you don't stare at a prayer in hell of winning. And I said, you want to make a difference? You better join Trump, because that's not going to happen. And he joined Trump only after New York. He applied to run as an independent, and New York kicked him off the ballot. Then he finally realized, okay, what I was warning was correct. This is not my opinion. I'm just telling you what I know from direct sources. I always try to, the computer forecasts or you can look at on the system, you can see the arrays and when it's projecting turning points, etc. It's not my opinion. Opinions are okay, but we all have, good ones and bad ones at times. Maybe you had too much to drink the night before and you didn't look at everything in the morning, whatever. From a human standpoint, nobody's can be right 100% of the time. So try to eliminate that human factor as much as possible. And I was at a dinner in Berlin before the election, and all the press said, Trump was evil. No way he was going to win. I said, I'm sorry. My computer says he's going to win, and it's going to be big time. Really? Every newspaper says wrong. I said, sorry. This is what it is. I said, but I do know one thing. I said, he is a threat to the neocons, and I think they're going to try and assassinate him. Then they really thought I was nuts. After that took place, I got a phone call. Holy shit, you really do know these people. I said, look, I've been to dinner with them. All right. When you look in their eyes, you do not see a warm light. It's just the way they are, and it's you have to understand you cannot judge everybody by yourself. Just because you wouldn't do something doesn't mean they wouldn't. And they act out of their own character and experience and beliefs. There was, a famous thing in the Middle East, and North Africa when, basically when Patton went in and got there, and the Brits were taking these Arabs and torturing them. Where are the Nazis? There's that, and they wouldn't talk. And he said, knock this stuff off. Get the biggest pig. Bring the pig in here. Pig? What do you want with the pig? Bring the pig in. All right. Said, see the pig? I'm going to kill the pig. And if you don't tell me what I want to know, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to bury you in the pig skin, and you're never going to see Allah. Never had to touch anybody. this is what you have. You fight with what somebody else believes, not what you believe. Simple as that. It's they let in all these migrants into Germany. You can Google it up. They raped over 1,000 girls on New Year's Eve. As it was back in 17 or something. The government, what did they do? Oh, we can't allow the press to say that this really happened. So they told the police to change all the reports from rape to assault. Nobody in government, I'm telling you, will they ever admit a mistake. I mean, when I was young and I thought I could make a difference, I found out I couldn't. Met with the Treasury back in 81 when Volcker raised the interest rates up. And I said, guys, national debt's going to double by the end of the decade because of these rates. They very calmly said to me, yeah, Marty, but we'll be paying back with cheaper dollars. I said, so you know what you're doing then. Look, I mean, I learned from my efforts in Washington. I can go in and say, if we don't do this, 25 million people will die tomorrow. Well, maybe you're wrong. They'd rather the 25 million people die and then vote for me, I'll get the guy that did it. From their perspective, if I ran for office and I said, vote for me because I saved your job. And you're going to say, well, how do I know I would have lost it? It's better you lose your job than I say, vote for me, I'll get the guy that did it. That's politics. I've learned, I've been in advising governments around the world. They're all the same. Doesn't matter. Whatever they want to call themselves. In Plato, he recorded a debate between Socrates and Thrasymachus. And Thrasymachus was right. He said justice is the same in every form of government. It's only the self-interest of those in power. Nothing's changed in 2,000 years.
Wanted to ask you as it relates to, you've mentioned about obviously we're talking, of course, about people in power, and you mentioned about the deep state earlier. I had G. Edward Griffin on last episode, and he mentioned about politics kind of being like the WWE, and that right there it's all theatrics and such, and you've got, to your point, deep state actors and such. Um, when you go down that rabbit hole, you hear of the Trilateral Commission, you hear about the Committee of 300 and other different groups and such. What's your take on those? And well, I'll just leave it at that. Well, I would love to hear your take on those.
Look, I have a tape on my site. The former president of France, Holland, with Merkel in the European Parliament. And he openly states that the whole purpose of the EU was to prevent European war. This is that theory that one government will prevent war. And I said, it's total BS. I said, the Roman Empire was one government. How many civil wars did they have? People are people. All right. But you do have this deranged idea of if we conquer everything, control everything, one government, and we'll bring peace to the world. Doesn't work. Sorry. The only reason Rome functioned and worked was that they didn't have socialism or anything of that nature. I mean, they had a like a welfare state for widows and orphans, yes. But what as long as everybody benefits, then the Roman Empire, it was more beneficial to be in it rather than out. So somebody in France could make their pots and sell them to somebody in Syria. Peace is achieved not through control and one government. No. Peace is achieved basically through economic ties. You want peace with Russia and China? You don't put sanctions on. Okay. We basically, as long as they're beneficial to the Russian people, they're not going to want a leader that's going to say, okay, we're going to war. Well, what do you mean? I'm going to lose everything that I'm doing. Even during the American Civil War, all right, Lincoln decreed that if you owed money to somebody in the South, you weren't allowed to pay them. This is, what happens. All right, so if there are economic ties and that everybody benefits, that's what creates the peace. Look, I mean, this is why people that, de-dollarization, they don't understand the world economy at all. U.S. consumer accounts for nearly a third of all consumer spending in the world. Germany's got to sell its BMWs. Japan's got to sell its Toyotas to Americans. Okay. China's selling their EVs and stuff. That's what creates the peace. That's what also allowed Germany and Japan to rise from the ashes. Okay. It's economic ties, not welfare or anything of that nature. That doesn't build an economy. And I can tell you that Europe, the big problem Europe has, it's still using the mercantile system. We make stuff, sell it to everybody else. But look at Germany. They keep their taxes at record highs. The average net worth of a German is less than that of an Italian. They're so afraid of inflation. All right. Yet they suppress their own people. China has looked at the European model and the American model. What are they doing? They're trying to build a consumer-based economy, resurrect the Silk Road, etc. All right. Unlike Europe, after all these tariffs and stuff that Trump is trying to knock down out of Europe, after World War II, they put on draconian tariffs to prevent anybody from competing with with their industry that was just starting to rise again. So they protected them. You couldn't import anything. So it got very, very draconian. And that's basically the Smoot-Hawley you heard about in here with tariffs in the United States. That was a response to the absurd tariffs in Europe. Democrats completely misrepresented it back then as well, because Smoot and Hawley were two Republicans from agricultural states. And they were putting in tariffs to protect the farmers because Europe was producing and sending it over here, And because it's basically subsidized, they were undercutting American farmers. So that's what the whole tariffs were about. And they didn't come in until the summer of 1930, after the market had already started to crash. But in the 32 elections, they stood up and said, oh, the Great Depression was caused by the tariffs of the Republicans, which is total nonsense. I don't know one economist that would ever support that theory about that. They came almost a year afterwards, and they were on agriculture. The economy was already falling apart, and in 1927 there was the first G4, where Europe came and talked the Fed into lowering interest rates and hopefully to divert capital back to Europe. And the stock market ended up rising dramatically. They raised interest rates. They doubled interest rates between 27 and 29. It was just a real mess. And it was all over trade and trying to manipulate capital flows one way or another. And like I said, read Herbert Hoover's memoirs from 1931. Might open your eyes.
What are some other things that might open people's eyes up? Things that that perhaps you haven't been able to share, or maybe you haven't been asked, that would really alter people's perception of things.
Now, it's just research that I've done. Things like fallacy of interest rates down, stock market up, stuff like that. It's total BS, really. Interest rates always go down. They went from 6% to 1% between 29 and 32. Didn't help the market. Just look at, the Great Recession, 07 into 09. Interest rates declined, didn't stop the market. Where is it that interest rates decline is bullish? You read the newspapers before 29, when rates went up, it was seen as bullish. It shows there's still a demand for money. If people aren't interested in borrowing, then the economy is going to go down. And simple as that. We've done a lot of these things out. I've written a lot about it on our blog, but look, the stock market has never peaked with the same level of interest rates twice. The high in interest rates on New York Stock Exchange was 1899, almost 200%. 1929 was 6. Why? Okay. 1899, it was a panic in Britain, and they needed money. So the British were selling all the assets in America to take the money home. So it was a capital outflow. So as the capital left, interest rates went higher. 1929, because of World War I, all the money was here. Then you had the, auto big boom, was kind of like the dot-com bubble of the 20s. So they were all participating in that. So the money stayed here. So you had capital concentration in the United States. So interest rates went up the least because there was more money around here slushing around than there was in 1899. So it's as I said at the beginning, capital moves like a herd of wild animals. It moves from one sector within an economy as well as between countries. We hear it, the AI bubble, .com bubble, and then everybody will focus on just that one sector. And they do the same thing internationally.
Wanted to also ask you about you hear different pundits talk about like Agenda 2030, transhumanism, depopulation, myriad of other things. Any comments on that?
Look, I can tell you that the whole COVID scam, stuff like that, was for climate change. I had inside information that coming from the WEF 3 months before anybody even heard of the word COVID, phone calls were being made, get out of the markets, a virus is coming. All right. Why? The whole, I even have a video, I put it on the blog a few days ago from the WEF. Oh, the world is silent. How great these lockdowns really are. Pollution declined. They pulled it. I have a copy of it. All right. And it was in, tell us how nice it was to be locked down. Yeah. And they go, this wasn't very good. So they pulled it from the, but I have a copy of it. Look at what they achieved. They successfully reduced the number of people that go to an office. That's why we have a commercial real estate crisis. All right. People are working remotely and ended commuting. The other theory that they were pushing, the WEF was pushing dramatically, was 15-minute cities, all for climate change. All right. The COVID thing, that was for climate change. You don't lock down everybody. It doesn't work anyhow. I had a respiratory issue. I was tested 3 times for COVID, negative. My daughter says, you got to go to the hospital. She got me an appointment with the head of pulmonary at Tampa Hospital. All right. I go in, say, look, I don't know what it is. It's not COVID. The head of pulmonary. Know what he said to me? No, we still think you had COVID. The tests aren't valid. I said, okay, thank you. um, what are you going to do? I mean, look, this 2030, all this nonsense of climate change, reducing the population, it's, you can also Google it up in the New York Times. All right. Former, Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg. She got to the Supreme Court when Roe versus Wade was there. And it's right in New York Times. Had nothing to do with women's rights. It was all about eugenics, reducing the population. That was Planned Parenthood, started by Bill Gates' father. Look, I disagree with this stuff, but them and the Rockefeller, this is what they believed. So Gates is, you got videos of him reducing the population, all this stuff, climate change. They really believe this nonsense. Climate has always changed. There were in 1772, and you can look this up. That was the first discovery of a completely frozen animal in Siberia. All right, it was a woolly rhinoceros, which are extinct. that is what really propelled the Age of Enlightenment, because they were finding animals, mammoths, with still grass in their stomach. So it was like, huh? What, you're eating breakfast and you're suddenly frozen? Like that, it was so dramatic and so quick. Um, how can there be grass on the ground, you're eating it, and then frozen in the tundra? Um, so that's really what started the whole Enlightenment period, that people were beginning to realize that it's not linear, it's cyclical. All right, there could be ice age, then warming again, then back to ice age again. And so these people that promote climate change, um, they're linear thinkers. I mean, we had a politician down here in Florida, because every once in a while you get what we call a red tide in the Gulf. It's really a bacteria. And she's running for office. Vote for me. I'll eliminate red tide. Blames all the farmers and their chemicals. I Googled it. What was the first red tide reported? 1642 by the Spanish. I think that was well before any farmers or chemicals were around. But they always want to blame humanity for it. We caused it. As if the climate has never changed, ever. But we're the sole cause of it. The best that you can possibly get in cyclical analysis is that we may increase the amplitude of a cycle, but we do not cause it. If you killed every farmer and we all starved to death, there's still going to be a red tide. There's still going to be ice ages, warming periods, whatever you want to talk about. It's so you look at the UN, that big conference they had on climate change. Look closely. They would not allow anybody to speak that had a contrary view. One size, that's it. We're right. If you agree with us, you can talk. If you don't, sorry, there's the door. So much for democracy, so much for anything. Free speech doesn't exist. You go against their agenda, you're lucky you didn't commit suicide,
Spooky stuff. Um, I imagine that, for the past 50 years, basically, you've been very much into the world of finance and politics and things of that nature. It's really, I'm sure, have had an impact. I mean, quite literally. I mean, you're in the career and such, but also perhaps things that weigh on you. Perhaps there's things that you don't feel comfortable sharing on camera. How do you, I guess, you know, escape this, so to speak? I mean, I don't know if you care to share, like, how you, I don't know if you play tennis or you go on hikes. I mean, how do you kind of get away from this world? Because you're in it quite a bit. You're talking about a lot of different shows, etc.
uh, I just have to deal with it. That's about it. I asked a friend in Washington, I said, why does everybody call me? And he says, because you yell at them. And they have a law that if you accept any money from a government, you have to register as an agent of that government. So I can't take money from any government, period. Not even the U.S. government, because then it ruins my credibility on the other side. Look, back in I try to reflect how the heck I even ended up here, but and I think my father had taken the family to Europe for the summer in 1964, and that taught me currency, because we went from Sweden all the way down to Italy, around France, etc. And every time you crossed the border, you had to change the currency. So I understood, that taught me about currency. It taught me that the currency of your home country is the way you think of value in your head. Because somebody would say, oh, it's quinquenta milliliter. And I would look, okay, fine, convert that to dollars. All right, is it fair or is it not fair? So I had to learn, you didn't study any of this stuff in school. It was never taught, because we were under the fixed exchange rate of Bretton Woods, whatever. So I happened to have had a client. His name was Walter Zengerle, who was a senior VP at Franklin National Bank. And that was the first bank that failed on a currency problem in 1974, just 3 years after Bretton Woods collapsed and the floating exchange rate started. And he knew I understood about currencies. And he said, gee, would you come take a look at this? I think it's got something to do with currency, but I'm not sure. The bank was the first failure on a 10% move in the Italian lira. This was, I think they were the 10th largest bank. I'm not sure. They were up there because this is the bank that started MasterCard. So after that, because they never taught this stuff in school, I would get any currency problem. It was like, get the guy that did that. The next thing, I'm being dragged into everything. When they're forming the G5 in 1985, I'm called up by Washington. 87 crash. I'm called in there for the presidential commission because everything had to do with currency. So I was getting called into governments around the world, got to meet Margaret Thatcher, all currency. Currency was very important to politically. So, that ended up dragging me into governments everywhere. In war, we had a central bank in Lebanon had asked if we could do a model in their currency. Put it in the computer, out came, and the country was going to fall apart in 8 days. I thought there was something wrong. I called them. I said, hey, there's got to be something wrong with this data. And I told him what it said. He's very calmly, he said, well, what currency does it recommend? I said, well, the Swiss franc. 8 days later, the Civil War began. So obviously they saw the money moving themselves. They only came to me for the timing, but I didn't know what the fundamentals were going on. Same thing happened with a client. We had a client who was probably one of the biggest shippers in the Gulf, and calls me on the phone. He says, Iraq's going to start attacking shipping in the Gulf tomorrow. What do you think gold's going to do? I said, tell me, a war's going to start tomorrow? Yeah. So by 98, I had learned from all these incidents. And I stood up in London at our conference. I said, look, Russia's going to collapse, and I give it about 30 days. London Financial Times happened to have snuck in the back of the room, and they put it on the front page. Armstrong says Russia's going to collapse and we're going to have nukes running around, It collapsed. That was long-term capital management crisis, all this stuff. So I've been dragged into all this around the world. Even 97 Asian currency crisis. I was called in by the Central Bank of China. It was, I went because I wanted to go see the Great Wall. It's all right. I thought I was going to have to listen to some bureaucrats again. I got there. It was very interesting. They had sent these people to go work on the dealing desks in New York, London, and Tokyo, and then they went back to run the bank. So when I got there, I thought I was going to meet a bunch of bureaucrats or academics, and I met traders. So actually, when I came back, the guys from the Treasury and the Fed called, and they said, "What was it like? You're the first one to ever go to, the Central Bank of China." I said, "Well," I said, "very interesting." I said, "They only hire people with experience." I like to stick the knife in the back and then turn it. I've seen it all. Not something that I've set out. If you asked me if I would have ever wanted to go in this career path when I was in high school, I would have said, "What are you, crazy?" My old PA used to have one of those stick men on her desk and held a little sign, said, "Shit happens." Very true. um, so I've just seen it all. How do I get through it? I've gotten accustomed to it at this stage, I guess. And I had sat down for lunch with one of the producers that did the movie from The Forecaster, Karen Steinberg. We were in Munich. And she asked me, how can you advise on trillion-dollar portfolios? And it was an interesting question because then I said, "Huh." I thought about it, and I said, "I just don't think about it. I just walk in, yeah, do this, that, the other thing, move." Where other people couldn't do it. They're so worried if they made a mistake, they might lose 100 billion or something like that. I just don't think about it. This is what this market's going to move that way. I just not thinking about the amount of money. And she said to me that she had interviewed one of the top brain surgeons in Germany, and he retired. He quit. And she interviewed him, and she asked him why. He really wasn't that old. And he said to her, when I thought about what I was doing, that if I made the slightest mistake, this person might not walk again or talk or whatever. I couldn't do it anymore. And so I've been there, done that. With politicians, I noticed the same thing. And what made me notice it was actually Trump. Back in March of 2020, I went to dinner at Mar-a-Lago. And he said he wanted to pull the troops out of Afghanistan. Fine. But it was the reason. He said he was tired of writing letters to their parents that your son died for God and country. He said, what are we doing there? They've been fighting over borders for 1,000 years. What difference are we going to make? It was the first politician, I had met many, who ever even thought about the people that died on the battlefield. Good friends with Maggie Thatcher, went to her house for Christmas dinners and stuff. I mean, and I realized it's the same thing with me. But with them, they're told, don't think about the people that die in war. Otherwise, you can't do it. We got to beat them. It's like a football game. That's it. And everything else is just collateral damage. So I hope I explained that so you understand it. I came to that realization when Cameron forced me to say, how can you do this? And granted, nobody else was doing, for portfolios of that size. Even when I was called into the 87 crash, you know, talking to this, academic, and I said, do you understand what makes markets move? Oh, I teach finance. Yeah. I said, very nice. At the time, U.S. national debt was $6 trillion. I said, I have $3 trillion under contract. I think I know how capital moves. It. I mean, now you're talking about, you're into, 20, $30 trillion stuff. I mean, it's just astronomical. People would ask, how can you do it? It's just phone numbers. You cannot visualize it. All right. It would be funny. You'd be trading and say, yeah, buy me $1 billion of this. And you go out to dinner at $600. We would just say it's just phone numbers. You can't even visualize it. What it's worth. What would it buy? Most people don't realize it. Oh, he's a billionaire. You can't spend that kind of money. Okay. All you can do at that level is use it to bribe people to do something you want. That's Bill Gates and Soros. Can't spend it. There's nothing you can possibly buy. I think the highest valued house is like 100 million. There's only one of them in the country. I mean, what are you going to do? So it's just phone numbers. So when you get it at that level of money, it's you cannot visualize it, and it's for power. That's all.
Now, you mentioned Bill Gates. Would you say he's evil?
I don't know. Depends what your definition of evil is, but he is indoctrinated into his father's thinking, which I think comes this from Malthus in the 18th century. His problem was that, granted, he was correct that population will increase. His theory was that it will increase beyond what we can afford to feed it. What he did not understand was that there's a cycle in production of food as well. So once the combustion engine came into play, and you had tractors, okay, fertilizers, all of a sudden the production of food dramatically increases. So I think the Rockefeller Foundation, Gates, I think they were all trapped into this idea that Malthus put out to begin with in the 18th century. And I totally disagree with him. Um, I would say my opinion is that besides his population ideas of reducing that, um, I believe he is, uh, his character tells him always to become a monopoly. Um, he had to step down from heading Microsoft because that's what, he would target companies like Netscape, any competitor, target them to create a monopoly, basically. And so then to stop Microsoft from being broken up, he had to step down. We want him out. Look what he's done in vaccines. Same thing. He's into every company. This is he's got the money and he uses it for power. Soros, same nonsense. It's, um, he ended up being indoctrinated, I think, by uh, a Professor Popper at the London School of Economics. Again, you know, obviously not so brilliant, in my opinion. If he was smart enough, he would realize that Popper was wrong. Um, Still tries to create this open society, merging all the races together. And sorry, there's different, this is the theory behind Europe, why it's failing. Um, they're changing people's culture, the religions. Um, you can't do this. That's what communism was. It was anti-religion. We're going to make everybody a drone. You have no, forget your individualism, your any personal aspirations. Put it in the rubbish bin. Here, you're next in line. We need somebody to sweep the floor. Here's a broom. That's communism. Um, when I went to China, I was taken off to another facility to help them become capitalist, and it was very, very interesting. They were monitoring 249 varieties of tea. They were not interfering. They were just tracking everything, though. And so I was taken in, and the questions I was being, why is this tea selling for like $1 here, but $5 over there? I said, well, where's it come from? Well, here. I said, first you have transportation costs. I go, oh, okay. I said, then somebody will pay more for this tea versus that tea if they like it more. Oh, really? I mean, it was fascinating to be in that position. I actually saw why communism failed. They had no understanding of human preference. I like this tea more than that tea. Um, and under communism, that tea that was $1 here has to be $1 over there, even if it costs you $10 to get it there. Totally inefficient. But all this comes from the same propaganda of Marx and socialism, equality. As soon as you hear that word, be careful, because equality means you have to surrender your individualism for somebody else. Um, and I mean, I've heard somebody say even about transgenderism. Whereas that is their personal issue, fine. But then everybody else has to accept by force whatever that is. It's and then they're like pushing it in schools and stuff. I mean, you're going too far. When I can't call my mother, oh, she's a birthing machine because it might offend somebody else on the other side of the country. I mean, sorry. Now you're interfering in my side. And that's typical in any socialistic system under Marx. Equality. Everybody's got to be the same. Doesn't work that way. Sorry.
Yeah, that it sounds good in theory, and that's what I'm realizing is a lot of things sound good, but are not practical. Martin, anything else you'd like to dispense? Actually, you know what? I want to ask you one more thing, kind of unrelated to the whole economics and politics and all that, but I'm really curious. I'll let you go here. The UAP phenomena you hear about. It started off, very fringe. No one would talk about it. You're an oddball if you went down that rabbit hole. I think of John Mack and some of these other people. Now we hear about it in Congress. These Navy whistleblowers, this and that. What's your assessment of this topic?
Um, Pretty much the same. I mean, I think that uh, all this stuff, it's um, people come up with these ideas and then they try to force them on everybody else. And it just doesn't work that way. It's I don't know. I think that we have to understand that it's we are individuals, and you don't want to pay me $30 million a year to throw a football and the Super Bowl, um, or stand up and sing at a concert, or I mean, we don't have different talents. Um, so I mean, all these ideas that somebody comes up with in these fringe different areas. Um, I don't know. I just see the same pattern over and over and over again. You can change the subject matter. Um, there was Merrill Lynch had a couple of guys, young young guys, and they were selling. They devised, absolute foolproof way to increase the percentage profits in your portfolio. And they're running around, and what they said was, okay, fine. So we buy 30-year bonds, we short the 10 years against them, we take the split between the interest and add that to your portfolio, and you can increase your yield in your portfolio. It all blew up. Orange County went bankrupt, etc. But I was an advisor to Temple University at the time. And they were running around to these universities pitching this new way to make money. And the chairman said they had to go sell it to me. And if I approved, then the university would do it. So they came in, sat down with them, and they went over. I said, guys, it's going to blow up. Oh, why would you say? Because interest rates are going to go up, not down. And as they blow up, you're going to get a negative yield out of this. And, oh, no, I said, really, I'm wrong? Sorry, I cannot advise the university to put their trust funds in this. They left and went back to him, to the chairman, said that I was too old. This is my 1980s. I'm too old to know the new way to make money. And Dick said to him, well, he was at least 10 or 15 years older than me. He says, well, if he's too old, then I'm ancient. He kicked him out. And it blew up. But I've seen the same scheme over and over and over again. I can't tell you how many times. The instruments change. All right. I've been called into, we borrow in Swiss francs and that will lower your interest on your mortgage. Blew up in Australia. They blew up in Europe. They were borrowing on, and I met with the Swiss bank. I said, the peg's going to break. I said, look, well, we think we can hold it. I said, really? I said, history's on my side. Not one country's ever been able to successfully do this. Academics in charge. No, we think we can. It blew up. Then all the banks finding mortgages failing, etc. Why? Because the bank said, look, we can give you a loan in Swiss francs. Okay, and we'll save you interest. So they did this. And then the Swiss franc on the FX markets blows out. Suddenly you owe 20% more in your mortgage than what it was because of currency. Same things happen in China. You can Google it up. Most of these emerging markets, just look at, about 70% borrow in dollars so they can sell it. So I've just seen the same thing over and over and over again. It's like watching the same movie 20 times, It gets to be a bit boring for me. So maybe that also explains why it's like, yeah, okay, fine. I know what will happen. So it doesn't bother me anymore. It's like, yeah, okay. I don't know. I've just been there, done that, seen it so many times. It's what Europe's doing right now, going to blow up. Humanity, I think, why cycles exist and history repeats is that each generation has to make the same mistake. Nobody looks back to see what was the outcome before. Every major crisis, somebody steps up at these committees. Oh, this is what we'll do. Never have I ever heard in at least 50 years of dealing with this a simple question. Has anybody tried this before? Did it work? Never. Not one commission has ever done that. When I got called into the 87, he said, we're going to find the guy that shorted this market and force it down. I said, excuse me. Do you realize that every investigation since 1907 began with those words and nobody's ever been found? Hello, Then you get the crazies that, we should outlaw short selling. Really? It's the short who provides the support in the panic. He's the only one that has the courage to buy. Everybody else is going, oh my God, they're not going to buy until at least hits bottom. It's just, I don't know. Sometimes it gets frustrating for me because I feel like it goes, I warn them. They don't do it. And it's like, yeah, what do you want me to say? Been there, done that, watched it so many times. You all make the same mistake. And ironically, we learn individually from our mistakes. but you are in some big portfolio or politics or whatever, you make that mistake, you're fired. They bring in the next guy. Next guy never made that mistake. So he's going to make it again in the future. That's it. Whereas the other guy's going to go, hey, I don't know, this smells like the last time. Um, in my younger days, there'd always be the guy in the corner of the trading room and go, this is just like 1929, and you look at him, really? You know, um, so it's been an interesting ride. Um, been there, done that. I certainly have had a front row seat. Um,
You have definitely been there. Oh, I was just gonna say you've been there, done that, got the T-shirt, Martin.
yeah.
Well, how can people learn more about you and get in touch with you, Martin?
You can go to our site. It's armstrongeconomics.com. You don't have to put in any emails or anything. We try to keep it open. We don't sell advertising. We try and keep it open for the world. We're not blocked anywhere. They can look at it in Russia. They can look at it in China. We even have offices in China. Um, so we try to keep it open source for everybody to look at. Um, so they can at least get to see something that's not all biased based upon personal opinions or agendas or whatever. Um, I'll cheer Trump on something that's good, and I'll say, no, sorry, I disagree with him on something that he didn't. You can't be partisan.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Martin, as always, I appreciate your time and looking forward to having you on before long.
Well, thanks a lot. Take care of yourself out there.
I appreciate it. Quick ask: over half of you who watch the show regularly haven't yet subscribed. If you've enjoyed the show, you're finding value in it, subscribing is really the best way to support the channel. It's of course free. It literally takes 2 seconds, and it lets the algorithm know that this content matters. And of course, my commitment to you is going to be that I'm going to continue to bring on great guests, refine those questions. And of course, I'm always receptive to your feedback. If there's certain people that you'd like to have on, or certain questions, or this, that, and the other that you'd like to have as part of the show going forward, things of that nature, please let me know. I'm pretty easy to access. Anyhow, that's my commitment to you. If you can subscribe, that would mean a lot. Thanks.